My attempts to buy that house were many, and
Right.
one of the fellows who was a member of the fraternity that was in charge, maybe he was an alumnus of the University of Oklahoma, having graduated there.
Right.
His name was Bud Parker, but Bud attended the Oklahoma Military Academy in Claremore. This property originally was a Chi Omega sorority, that the elite sorority on campus.
Okay.
And then substance use was by another fraternity. I don't know if after that it was one fraternity or not, or more, but this one happened to be the Deke fraternity. And there's an expression: if you can't be a Greek, be a Deke. So it didn't rate too high amongst the fraternity crowd on campus. But Bud Parker was one that I negotiated with. He was the one, and so we settled on a price. I bought the property for $90,000. That was about 72, 73 when I bought it.
Okay.
Because I was really very motivated to remodel the property. I had taken out a loan on it, so I needed to get some renters in there.
Right.
$90,000 completely furnished.
Okay.
A large parking lot with it. All of the furnishings throughout that house were of wood oak.
Wow.
Oak wood.
Oh,
They had some really nice furniture.
And there's one of a kind mural in the walkway.
Yeah, it had mural in the dining room. Really, the scenes of it captured the early history of America on up and through as it came back around.
Wow.
All four sides. But you had these type of doors, French doors, off the main entry
Yeah, I remember those.
that went in there, and then a single door around, a single door from the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Probably two doors going into that. It was something to behold. It looked like old world art.
Mm-hmm.
And there's supposed to have been only two places in the United States that had these murals, this mural, and that's this in the White House. But anyway, I was forewarned by the president of the fraternity that the house had some paranormal activity going on, and that the ghost, it might be anywhere from first floor to the third floor, were friendly ghosts. I was headlong into the project of remodeling it. I was going on probably 5 hours sleep. I'm a workaholic. I was then, and for several years, remodeling various properties I owned in Norman. But this was a showcase property. It's 12,000 square feet, full basement, full-size windows in the basement, which means, it's very inhabitable there. You'd look out, you'd see nothing but concrete, but the windows were full size going down into the earth. But they were drained, and screened. Leaves couldn't get in there, water. So it was an interesting place to be. But that's where the bad boys, the bad entities, dwelled, seemed to hang out. And the thing that I would install deadbolt locks. I actually, on the first floor, improvised locking system where they couldn't defeat a standard lock, window lock, one of those little turn locks, and actually had myself locked into this place. Which would define either a great deal of courage on my part or a great deal of insanity on my part. But I lived and was fearful at times. There were times chills run down my spine, neck, because of doors slamming on the third floor. And there's no windows open. There's no wind coming into this place. I was totally remodeling it, putting expensive paneling throughout. There was no electricity. I was operating at night by candles, battery lighted lights, and yeah, definitely the basement was inhabited by some bad entities. I invited a couple of my friends over to see the progress made throughout this house with drop ceilings, grid ceilings, carpeted. These were not efficiency. They're efficiency rooms, not efficiency apartments. There was a central kitchen. It was completely full. When students found out that it was haunted, I thought I probably wouldn't get a single resident tenant there, but much to the contrary, it filled up. They just thought, wow, how cool is this? You know, and but there was no there was not any horrific experiences with the full occupancy, probably with students that were just as ornery and mean as these entities were. I say that tongue in cheek, but I'm trying to recall. I mean, there was Mrs. Quinnett, who assisted me during the peak seasons of rental seasons, and students looking for ways to work their way through school, that helped manage these properties that I owned, and I owned a lot of them around the campus primarily. The young student name was Green, last name was Green, but Dr. Quinnett came over to see the progress that had taken place there and brought his Labrador retriever with him. And we were just casually going through the house and then descending into the basement. The dog went down to the first level, but wouldn't take the steps on down into the basement. He sensed these entities and whined and came back up out of the basement. We did not have the good sense to do that. I was captive. I had this property, I had the ownership of the property, and I had responsibility to get it remodeled to get the students in. And I didn't finish it until in October, school having started in September. And trying to get his dog to come back down there, it just wasn't going to happen. The dog was not coming back down there. Another friend of mine was a lawyer, or CPA. Wife was a professor of English, and of course they were following the progress of this place and were excited for me and my ownership. And George Thomas was the guy's name, and he came over and we went down. Lastly, the last part of the tour was always in the basement, so we go down there and there are steps down, then a landing, then the rest of the steps into the basement. And he got down and he said, "Whoa," he said, "Boy," he said, "I feel something. I don't like what I'm feeling down here." And I said, "Well, I've been working down here for 3 months or more, all through this house." And I said, "I have a few stories to tell you. There are cold spots on the second floor, and as you walk down the hallway, you would encounter cold spots. These doors slamming to bathrooms up on 3rd. It wouldn't go on and on and on. It would happen a couple of times, that was it. There are times I would ascend a flight of stairs from 1st floor to 2nd floor, never having a problem with the lights going on, operating. And then there'd be times when they wanted to have fun with me and the lights wouldn't come on. And I thought it'd probably be a good idea not to go upstairs. I would just stay downstairs. I worked in the basement. That was the last place I remodeled. The Trident room, the so-called secret room. Nobody but sorority members were allowed in that. Oh yeah, there were entities there. The Deeks won the contest amongst the fraternities with the best skit for 6 straight years. They were called the Gravediggers. And it was an outstanding skit. These guys dressed in drab clothing. They had tombstones from the 1800s, late 1800s. They had coffins. They had, I recall, 2, maybe 3 coffins and 4, I believe, headstones.
Were these kept in the basement?
They were kept in the basement. And there were times that I really felt frightened. I was glad I had my carpenter's apron on, my hammer. A lot of good that would do me. But it could be that somebody else is just trying to break in, in a basically empty place. Like I say, it's full basement, 3 stories to 12,000 square feet. And I'm thinking of this young college student named Green. What had happened to this boy actually frightened him so badly that he just was work by day and sleep somewhere else by night. And he told Dr. Quinette's wife that the first night, asleep in his room, in the middle of the night, he was slammed up against the wall. Bad dream, he thought at first. No, he hurt from that experience. And he shared that with his girlfriend. The next evening, and that particular night I recall, I don't know the date now, we're talking 30 years later, 40 years later, isn't that right? Yeah, over 40 years. I'm recalling leaving there. I worked long hours for a lot of years down there. I remember pulling out of the parking lot and coming around to the front of the building and looking up and seeing how eerie it was with the flickering of a candle up there in his room, a couple of candles. And it was raining. And I thought, well, good to be out of there. But I had cold chills all the time. I heard things that would drop and so apparently I guess the prayers of my mother probably had a lot to do with my survival. Yeah. I can remember one evening in the basement. I mean, I'm cutting through 18-inch walls with masonry saws on one side and going around the other side and coming back through and cutting. And I just keep working. And with a saw going, you couldn't hear anyone. You could not hear anyone coming up on you. And so what happened to this young college kid in room 3 could have been that of a poltergeist. I had 739 Chautauqua, which was a Jewish fraternity. And I had a fellow named John that rented in room 3, by the way. No, 4. It was room 4. It was the northwest room. And he experienced it a few times and told me about it. He says, I have a poltergeist in that in my room. The next night, as that story was related to me, was I was called by Dr. Quinnett's wife, telling me that the student had come to her and talked to her and was telling her how he was tormented, how he was terrified of the experiences he had there in that room, and at night, sometimes in the house, other parts of the house. But he didn't want to be fired. My thinking at that time, the drug culture was at its peak, and that he was hallucinating. He didn't want to lose his job. He needed to work. And she said, no, John's not going to do that. So he calls me and tells me about the experience of having gone into the room that particular night. The following night, he went back in it. He was putting something into the closet to hang it up. Is when he was grabbed from behind. He was being choked. When he said, Jesus help me, or God help me, Jesus help me, I think it was the word Jesus. Jesus help me. And the mere mention of the name Jesus brought about his release. He said, I literally fell to the floor, fell to my knees. I thought I was being choked to death. The next night, his girlfriend, the third night, came because he's going to collect some things and move somewhere else. He continued to work for me. But he was going to do that, and he had walked up with her, and she stood at the head of the stairs, going from first floor to second floor. He was going across into his room, and as he opened the door, he heard footsteps. We had not had carpet down, so you could hear the footsteps of someone coming at him. 3 nights of this was just a little too much. In his haste, he failed to take his girlfriend by the hand and run down the stairs with her. He ran past her, left her up there on that floor as he descended out the door, front door. I wish I could think of Green's first name. But to see that, oh yes, I have to mention here that when I met with him, I can't digress anymore. I'm so sleepy. When I met with him, I did see what Gene had told me, that he actually had a rope burn around his neck. I saw it. I knew that there was an evil, a demon spirit that had gotten he encountered. As the story was coming forth, he began crying. He was really crying, and said, "John, I just don't know if I can go back over there. Not even to work. Certainly not sleep." I had returned to the house one evening. It was dark. The lights were on. Mrs. Quinnett was there. As I walked in, there was 4 men. I don't believe 3. I think there was 4, maybe even 5 men who came running, literally running down the steps. It was dark. And that's when the demon kind are at their strength in darkness, in late hours, I guess. So they came down and they told me, and I said, "Gene, what's this all about?" As they filed out the back door. They didn't stop to inquire of me and who I was, shake hands with me. And she stepped forward to tell me that they had been summoned to come there. And from this article in the paper, he's a friend of James, or Jack, or John, we're going to call him. And they prayed. They went through each room. They got the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor. It was room 14, I believe. There were 4 entities in that room. The nuns, the Catholic nuns, had rented this for the summer, for June, July, and August. And the paranormal activity was so strong, they moved out. They literally abandoned the place. They didn't stay the full summer. Anyway, this group of men that had come down the steps, the article came out in the Daily Oklahoma the next day, of which Dr. Tom Denton, a dear friend of mine, called me to say, "Hey, you've made front page of the Daily Oklahoman is about the story." Actually, it helped fill the place up real fast. The tenants came forth. I mean, and I never had vacancies there, ever. After they had left, the story broke in the Daily Oklahoman. Gene and I talked about this, and the doctor, I heard he had a doctor's, maybe he didn't, but anyway, I always thought it was Dr. Rhodes, had gone through every room efficiency, from third floor, second floor, first floor. And the reason it came down, it was already dark, and they didn't, I don't know if they finished up on second floor or not. Since they were coming down from second, I believe they'd finished second and third and came down, but they prayed over the whole house. And they were binding and casting these spirits out of the house. I said, James, when he called and he said, had revealed all that had happened to him. I'd heard a good bit of it, a portion of it from Jean Holmes, Jean Holmes, Mrs. Cornett, Jean Cornett. I asked, it's like his name about to come to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him to go to the library. As I'm a very understanding, very broad-minded person, I said that if you're having some issues, that's one thing, and you can handle it the best you can. On the other hand, I believe in the paranormal. I mean, it exists. I believe in ghosts. I believe in aliens. And so you're fine. You know, I don't blame you. You don't have to stay all night over there. Find another place to stay. I said, go to the library. About what this Charles Rhodes said, we can corroborate that story, because surely as a sorority person, she would have to be mentioned in the annuals. So you look at the 39th annual. I've been saying for years, I thought in my mind, I was saying my 37, 38. Sure enough, the gal's name was in that yearbook. And as this boy relayed the story to me, he was crying. He almost crying from the very inception, very beginning. He said, he probably called me Mr. Mayberry, I don't know. I insist most of the time that people call me by John. And he started crying. He said, it's real. She was in room 3, the room I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't recall ever, of course, after these people came in and, what's the word for it?
Exercise?
Exorcise. After I exorcised, they exorcised the place, maybe there is no more activity. And because it was dark, their life was threatened. They believed that they have the power after dark. And so there were, along with Rhodes, there were men from the church. There were actual ministers of the gospel, of the faith, that were there. There was a newspaper a man there.
Right.
How the article got in the paper. So there were some uncomfortable moments for me following that, because I didn't know if I was going to have an empty house. Never suspected these kids just they read the story and they came over and they wanted to know about the ghosts and they wanted to rent there and they weren't afraid of them. They weren't intimidated. And so I filled up fast, you know. There was no demonic activity at 601 Cruise, which was the old KA house. KA stands for Knights of Alcohol.